How are you? Well? All right. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. And this is what we will be talking about the next hour and 15 minutes about how to master yourself, how to master your emotions, how to master your mindset, especially when we are talking about a very, very high, fast-paced environment in which you are living and working in. When we're children, we dream. When we are children, we believe in Santa Claus, in the Tooth Fairy. We await Christmas, and we cannot even wait for Christmas to come. And when we're children, like me here, we're 3 years old, we pretend to be somebody else. When we're adults, we kind of lose this certain mindset. We kind of lose the connection to our visualization, to how important it is when we imagine something. And that as well, we will be talking about how important it is, how much strength and how much power our thoughts have, and how important it is to leave our comfort zone. Because life begins at the end of our comfort zone, and this is why I would love to invite you all to please get up for one moment. Now, do not worry, we will not massage each other, we will not be holding hands and singing hula hula. I'm always surprised, some people are like, oh, what a shame. I will show you the first method with which you will get the feeling within 1 minute, as if you had run around the corner for 10 minutes. Basically, workout 4.0, the new workout. So what you will be doing is you will be going into the position of the sprinter, that position that you take in every single morning when you sprint out of your bed, especially on Mondays. And you will swing your hand from your temple to your hips as fast as you possibly can. And really use the entire space. Sometimes I see people doing this. Now we need some music for this, and we will begin on the count of 3. 1, are you ready? 2, are you ready, Elia? And 3, go! Very good, faster, 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 faster. Temple hips, temple hips, temple hips. Now you're thinking, why did I come to her keynote? Why did we book her? There you go, quicker, 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 quicker. This German motivational, whatever she is. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you very much. Give yourselves a hand. Please have a seat. All right. You have proven you are the GMs of the day. You are the growth mindsetters of the day. And what exactly I mean by that, I will be telling you. But all of you, you got up. And maybe you know these moments and these meetings when you twist in circles and you have a feeling, oh my goodness, there's no more energy. Or maybe you know the situation that you're sitting in front of your computer and working and you're just completely tired. So as you can see on me right now, you do get energy immediately. So we need a certain mindset and we need a certain state. And this is exactly what this does. And there's another reason why I do this. It has to do with our goldfish. What do we have in common with a goldfish? Some people say it's the facial expression. Now, I know that we have people from all continents here, so it depends. Definitely in Germany, sometimes it could be the facial expression. Other people say, well, it's the limited space, or it's because the goldfish is turning and twisting in circles like us, like sometimes we are as hamsters in a wheel. But there's one thing that we have in common with a goldfish, and that is our attention span. Now, as adults, we have an approximate attention span of 8 seconds. And then nowadays, there are people who say, no, that's not true. The goldfish has a much longer attention span. Okay, fine. We do have a very, very short one. And we know how it goes, right? After the 9th or 10th second, we begin to think of anything else. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I want a hebe here? What do I have to do? Do I have a chérie? Do I have problems with my chérie? Do I love my chérie? Do I even want to go home? So we have all sorts of thoughts that are jumping from one to the next and to the next. We also call it the monkey mind. So it's sometimes also the art of living and the art of satisfaction to be able to come back into the here and now. And I know that you live and work in a very, very fast world. And we were speaking earlier at lunch how quick you have to react and how sometimes you don't even know what the outcome will be, but the client knows everything better than you, right? So what is happening right now in the world that we are living in? Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, once said, we produce as much data as since the beginning of civilization until 2003 in only 2 days. Now, those are 5 exabytes on data. Who here has the feeling time is running much faster today than even 5 years ago? Who here will never raise their hand, no matter what I ask? Okay, gotcha. So we do have the feeling that time is running so fast because we're so extremely busy. So we have a very, very short attention span. We are overwhelmed by information and by external factors. And at the same time, we have a very, very short focus. Harvard University showed these pictures to 27 radiologists. 27 radiologists that do nothing else but looking at those pictures. 83% did not see the gorilla. They saw everything else, but not the gorilla. So we do have a very, very short attention span, and let's look at how much or how short that attention span and how short that focus is.
Yeah, I get some pills from here. Do you know where I'm here?
Yeah, that right there is all for.
This one is even better.
Oh, where are we here? Sort of there.
Right here. Go on. You want to cross over there? Go down and start by be right there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, one could say, oh, that's not true, it was staged. This is called change blindness, and it was reproduced so many times. We are just so focused on our world. And a lot of times we don't widen our horizon. We heard earlier from Françoise how important it is to look at different perspectives, and that we will be talking about as well. Because we do have the feeling that we're saving the world every day, right? As Superman or Superwoman. But at the end of the week, sometimes we feel like this. Now, this has to do, as I said, with the external factors. It has to do with the stress that these external factors are obviously reproducing. And it has to do with something else. And for that, let me ask you one question. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has A, almost doubled, B, not changed, C, almost halved. Who's for A? Who's for B? And who's for C? Yes, you're in the statistics. Thank you. The answer is C. Now, this is from the book Factfulness from Hans Rosling, which I can highly, highly recommend. In this book, he and his colleagues talk about and show how much the world has actually evolved. And you can see here, even in Germany, for example, only 6% of the people who were asked actually gave the right answer. So we do have the feeling that everything is so difficult right now, right? The world is kind of getting worse every day. But in this book, you can see that it's actually not. It's actually in a lot of situations getting better. Now, why am I talking about this, and why is this relevant, and how is this relevant to the subject of stress? What happens is we have our brain, which still operates the exact same way it operated back in the days when we saw the saber-toothed tiger. You've probably heard of it, the fight, the flight, or the freeze moment when we get stressed. And at the same time, our brain puts a lot of attention onto something negative. The ratio is 3-to-1. We can have a fantastic day, but when this one colleague or this one customer or this other person talks to us in a bad way, we place 3 times the amount of attention on that. So our brain works like that. And it is important to know that, because we can actually do something. We are able to change our mindset. We are able to also deal with our emotions and with our stress. But first of all, let's look at the times of change. We're saying we're living in times of change now, but we've always lived in times of change, right? Otherwise, we would still be running around pretty hairy and eating bananas all day. Let's look at how much time has really changed.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Dübbert himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. Changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stops.
Welcome to our world, right? And don't you have the feeling sometimes your customers expect that from you when they send you something like, do it now? All right. When I first saw this, I was thinking, there's no way I can show this. Who here thought, oh my God, this is way too long. I'm going to die. Right? Only a few. Normally I have all the heads that raise up. The first part was only 67 seconds long. These 67 seconds for us felt like 10 minutes, right? Or 15 minutes. So times have changed. Now let's look at 100 years ago. This was the first camera, as long as actually the train that they were taking a picture of. 600 kilograms. And then nowadays we have cameras in the size of a credit card, and we're not even impressed. Whatever. Now this was one of the first vacuumers, 300 kilograms heavy. And now we know vacuumers can do the job by themselves. This was one of the first motorbikes, in parentheses, 1 point something miles an hour, 3 kilometers an hour. I'm wondering why did they even build it? Why bother? But okay, whatever. And now we do have motorbikes that actually drive by themselves. This was one of the first communication tools. And you actually had to scream into it so that you can hear the other person on the other side. And we all know it. It is our best friend. It is our lover. It is our mother and our father and our best person or thing ever, our smartphone, our cell phone. Now, what do you see here on the screen? What is missing? Yes, exactly. The phone app. Now, I heard earlier, and I've seen it obviously, that we are pretty young here, in parentheses, young here in this room. So we probably do have some of the digital natives already in this room. But even the younger generations, the kids nowadays, they hardly even know how to use a phone. It's not even important anymore. So times really are changing. We are entering new times. We are entering the times of artificial intelligence, which on the one hand can really scare us. And on the other hand, they can really support us and be great opportunities. So the workplace is changing at the same time. We're more going to work from hierarchy towards cross-functional teams. We're going from the typical orders towards the empowerment. I'm sure you've heard that word before. We're going from the extrinsic motivation in terms of money and bonus, not that it's not important anymore, but the new generations, for them, the intrinsic motivation is much more important. What is my why? How much time can I spend with my friends, with my family, etc.? We're going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and we're going from the traditional intelligence to the emotional intelligence. And the last two we will elaborate on. So, for the one hand, we do need a perspective change in order to change our mindset and in order to adapt to this new world. Now, in your opinion, which way does the train go? Inside the tunnel or outside? Who's for inside? Who's for outside? Yes, always 50-50, I love it. How about both? So it actually can go into both directions. So we are able to switch our perspectives. The second thing that we need that is important for us is to break our patterns. To break our patterns in terms of how we react, in terms of what we sometimes say, and also in terms of what we think. And what exactly I mean by that, I will be telling you shortly. And the third one is the adaptability to change. Now, you may be wondering, what am I doing here and why am I talking to you? So let me tell you a little bit about my story, about my way to adapt to change. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, this was my daily business. And I can imagine that some of you said, oh, that's my daily business. I hope not too many in here. I was retail director in one of the biggest corporations worldwide. I had my 80 employees, and I was really, really passionate about my work. And I was also working my 70 to 80 hours a week. And you know, sometimes we have those imprinting moments in life, right? Those insight moments. And one of my most imprinting moments was when my mother looked at me and she said, "Where did my shiny, happy daughter go?" Now, if you knew the Dübbert family, you would know that I'm from a very, very straightforward and very, very honest family. So I was thinking, okay, I do believe in love it, change it, or leave it, and maybe I should look into the mirror and ask myself, am I really happy with what I'm doing right now? And so I did adapt to my change, and I did change my perspective. And at the same time, I also broke my pattern because I went to Bali and I did yoga. Now you could say, oh yeah, it's the typical thing. Everybody tells that story. But if you would have known me at that point, you would have said, never ever is Vivienne Dübbert going to do yoga. I had the biggest prejudice. I thought I'm going to fall asleep while I'm doing yoga. I thought it would be too esoteric and whatever else. So I was thinking, okay, let me break my pattern. Let me do this yoga stuff. So I went to Bali, I did yoga, and I learned on how to get from this state into this state. And I basically did learn to change my perspectives because I did learn the headstand. And this looks really nice, but you did not want to see me the way I was when I learned the headstand. I was terrified, but it still looks nice right now. So it did change me, and it changed the way I looked at my world. And on top of that, afterwards, I'm obviously making a long story short, I quit my job and I broke out of my then business world and I created my new world. And I decided for myself how important it is to really live your life, which is why I brought you some handbands if you want to be primed on living your life. And this is the reason why. What do you think these squares could represent? Oh, not too many at the same time. I don't know what it is.
Your day-by-day life.
Day-by-day life, very, very close. Those squares represent the living weeks of an 85-year-old person. For the entire life. The other day I had someone, are those the rest weeks? No, it's for the entire life. So now it depends on you. Is that a lot or not? Because when I saw this for the first time, I was thinking, that's really not a lot. And I don't know if you know those when loops or traps. When I have time, I will take care of myself. When the next year begins, then I will do things with my loved ones and I'll be happy. And when I get more money, I will be happy. Now, if these were really true, how could it be that somebody who was loved by the entire world, who had everything for us from the external point of view, decide to take his life? How could it be that the World Health Organization lists per year 800,000 suicides? Those are every 40 seconds, one person. So it does not have to do with the external factors in terms of everything has to be perfect. It has to do with our intrinsic, with our internal factors. That is why I'm here. Now, what can we do in order to deal with a high-paced, stressful environment in this incredibly fast world? There's a toolkit of 3 most important factors. Number 1, your mindset. Number 2, your emotional intelligence. And number 3, your resilience. Now, let me begin with resilience. What does the lady say? What do we have to do when the oxygen mask comes? Help yourself first and then help others. When I was little, I never understood that. Really, it took me almost 30 years to understand this. When I was a child, I was always thinking, Jesus, that is so egoistic, us children. Whatever, I'm 39 years old now, I got it. So it is important to take care of ourselves first, right? So let us look at the 7 pillars of resilience, of what is important to thrive in a high stressful environment. Number 1, be optimistic. Now, I am not a fan of just think positive and everything is going to be fine. Just think positive and the problem doesn't exist. We're just going to ignore it. We're just going to think positive. What I mean by be optimistic, I mean be realistically optimistic. Meaning, know your challenges, and at the same time ask yourself, when you are in a crisis, when you are feeling stressed, what can you learn from it? What can you take out of it for yourself? The second one, accept situations. Now, there's a changeable world, and there's an unchangeable world. A person across from us, is our unchangeable world. That customer of yours that's really annoying you is your unchangeable world. And we know that from relationships, right? We try to change, or oftentimes we want to change that person. It doesn't work because everyone has a different personality, and because you can only, I cannot motivate you. It's impossible. I can only say things that resonate with you, that touch you in your heart, things that make sense for you, so that you yourself are intrinsically motivated. Now, change is our unchangeable world. We've seen that earlier, right? Our changeable world is our mindset, is the way we deal with things. Because in life, it doesn't matter so much what happens to us. It matters how we deal with what happens to us. How can we find solutions? And with every single challenge, ask ourselves, what can we do differently next? And how can we find a solution here? How can we leave the victim role? Now, victim role is a very hard word, very hard expression. But what I mean by that is every person, everybody, even animals, find themselves, I'm thinking of my cat, find themselves in a victim role at some point. Even the Dalai Lama does. I saw him a few years ago and he was sitting on stage and he looked bored as hell. So he must have been in a victim role in that moment. The question is, how long do you stay in that role? How much do you identify with it? And how do you get out of that role? And how do you take responsibility for your own situation, for your own mind, and for your own emotions, with the way you deal with your emotions? How do you create a network? Now, you've probably heard about you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. We will talk about that a little bit later. So network meetings or gatherings like this is so important because you can exchange ideas, you can learn from each other, and you can give each other strength. And at the same time, plan your future. And by that, I do not mean have a very, very big goal. Of course, that's good and it's great to have that. But what's even more important is to have small little goals, right? And at the same time, it also has to do with our brain and with our body. Because what happens when we actually reach a small goal, our body releases, maybe you've heard of it before, dopamine, for example. Now, dopamine is a hormone that gets released when we achieve something. Dopamine also gets released when we get a like on Facebook, or when we get that heart on Instagram, or when we get an email. That's why it's so important in the evening to watch how addicted you are to dopamine, because dopamine is highly addictive. So the more addicted we are to dopamine, the more we actually check our emails and the more it does stress us. On the other hand, dopamine is important for us when, for example, we are reaching goals. This is why it's important to set small goals so that you can actually celebrate it. And we had that earlier about the checklists. It's so important when you do a checklist to cross it out. Because when you cross it out, dopamine gets released. So you are actually rewarding yourself, like Françoise said earlier. Now, I wanted to find out more about this subject and what we can do to help ourselves to deal with stress. And I traveled to New York, a city that I've lived in for 6 years and I know pretty well, and I met with Columbia professor Hitendra Wadhwa. Now, he said we would meet in a typical New Yorker cafe, and I wanted to ask him a bunch of questions, basically have an interview with him. Now, the problem was it was a typical New Yorker cafe, which means everything is loud. The street is loud, the people are loud, the coffee machine is loud, the music is loud. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how in the world is he going to even hear me? So I was there a little bit earlier, and I was extremely nervous. And I'm sitting there with my little thing in order to record him, and then Professor Hitendra Wadhwa enters the cafe. And he doesn't just walk into the cafe. He floats into the cafe. And it was in this moment for me as if everything around him turned silent. I have never in my life met a person with such an aura around him, with such a calm aura. And then I knew, okay, I will ask him my question. And here we are sitting, and I'm showing him the sprinter, and he's probably thinking, okay, she's crazy, whatever. And then I'm asking him, in your opinion, what is the key to success for people in our fast-paced world to deal with the stress, with the expectation, with the pressure? And he answers immediately, a growth mindset. And he cites Dr. Carol Dweck, Stanford professor, who's the pioneer of mindset, who distinguishes between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Now she says we have both mindsets in us. It just matters how much we actually activate each one. Now she explains, if we have a fixed mindset, we think or we say, I am the way I am and I'm not going to be able to change. We also say, I just need the perfect client, I just need the perfect conditions at work and I will reach my goals. And we say, if that one person comes, if the right person comes, there will be no more problems. Everything will work out by itself. Now, with a growth mindset, we say, I can change my entire life. We also say, I find people that I can work with, that I can actually boost their skills, or we can learn together. And we say, if that right person comes, then we grow together, especially when we have a crisis. Now let me ask you, who here knows the sentence from school, I'm just not a math person? Anybody? Oh, quite a few. So happy. I did know that as well. Now I Googled, within 41 seconds, I got 835 million responses, so we're not alone. Now Carol Dweck says, a growth mindset means, say to yourself, I'm just not a math person yet. Exactly. She calls it the power of yet. And she says this little word opens the door to your skills and to your freedom. This little word makes a huge difference. If you say to yourself, I can't do it, practice saying to yourself, I can't do it yet. If somebody says to you, I can't do it, or those of you who do have employees, if you have a situation where your employee says, I can't do it, or your colleague says, I can't do it, ask that person, are you sure you cannot do it? Or do you maybe not know how to yet? Now, this is very important when it comes to a growth mindset. So basically, we can say your mindset stands for your success. Now, what can you do and how can you boost your mindset? How can you change your mindset or maybe boost the growth mindset? You can do that through 3 pillars, through your mind, your body, and the environment. Let's begin with the mind. We have about 70,000 thoughts a day. Now, from these 70,000 thoughts, scientists say that most of them are old. We've been thinking them yesterday and years before. They're nothing new to us. But why do we think them all the time? Because we have our patterns. We have our thinking patterns. We have our behavioral patterns. And what is important to know is that we can actually change those patterns. Now, what happens is when we think something over and over again, or when we do something over and over again, there are certain neuronal pathways that get created in our brain. We can see that here with a small child. Now, these neuronal pathways are very difficult to break. This is why it's so difficult to break to change our habits. But it's actually possible. It's number one possible if we have a very strong emotional experience, or even like a positive emotional experience. Let's say we fall in love. All of a sudden we do things, we say things that maybe we don't do all the time, or we don't say all the time. And we can break those neuronal pathways, or we can learn to break them with certain mental mind techniques. And today I will give you at least 3 of them, so you can learn on how to break your own patterns. Because the neuroplasticity says that our brain can actually change constantly. The best example for this are taxi drivers in London. Now, the next time you take a taxi in London, be aware that a genius is driving you. Because that person had to remember 25,000 streets, definitely not a job for me, and 10,000 sightseeing places over a period of 4 years. Now, neuroscientists found out that the hippocampus, it's not important for you to remember, but that parts of the brain are actually changing. So our brain changes constantly, which is, for me, it's fantastic. Because when we're having a crisis or when we're even feeling stressed, we can learn something from it and our brain can change. And I will tell you how later. Now, we have per second approximately 10 billion activities in our brain. Do you know the situation, or who here knows the situation, you're driving home and you ask yourself when you arrive, who just drove the car? So we have certain automatic responses, automatic situations, right? Now, who does regulate those moments? And who regulates, for example, our breathing, our heartbeat, so that we stay alive? It's our subconscious. Now, nowadays, neuroscientists say that over 90% of our reactions happen subconsciously. Only 10, or some even say only 3% are actually conscious moves. Everything else is happening subconsciously. But there's one thing that the subconscious cannot do. It cannot distinguish between reality and fiction. Now, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure about that, what happens when we have a nightmare? When we have a nightmare, we have the exact same stress reaction that we have when we're stressed at work, or that we had back in the days when the saber-toothed tiger came. Cortisol is being released, adrenaline is being released, noradrenaline is being released. We begin to sweat, we begin to breathe very, very fast, with a fast pace. Now, there were tests done with skiers who were measured, or their body reactions were measured, while just imagining riding down their piste, or I don't know how you say that it sounds weird. And then afterwards, they actually did it. In both situations, they had the same physical reactions. How could it be that millions of people are actually taking sugar pills, thank God, and that they recover? How could it be that there are actually knee placebo operations where one group is being actually operated and the other one just gets stitches so it looks as if they had been operated? The same recovery. What do I mean by that? Our thoughts and our beliefs are extremely powerful. What we believe in, we are sure that it's true. But it's not always true. And this is why we're here today, because sometimes our thoughts and sometimes that little devil telling us you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, is not right. Now let me tell you my situation of the power of beliefs. I was once asked, and I'm asking you here at the same time, who here can imagine pinching a potato, an uncooked potato, with a plastic straw within 20 seconds, like really stabbing it? Who here could imagine it? Possible? The highest optimists say yeah. When I was asked, I said, no way. There's no way it's going to happen. And then I did it, and did it work? No. And then I was asked, and somebody said to me, Vivienne, we're going to do this again. First of all, you hold the potato like this, because I held it like this. And when you hold it like this, your subconscious automatically says it's not possible. So you hold the potato like this, and you hold the straw as if it were a knife. And you visualize the way it goes through the potato. And so I'm holding the straw, and at that same time, someone is screaming, think about, and was mentioning a name. That was my old life. And this is my potato and my straw. What would have happened if I would have not done it again?
You would have believed it was impossible.
I would have believed it was impossible. Exactly. How many times do we have situations, and even now, even when we talk in the media, when the media talks about artificial intelligence, we're all going to lose our jobs, or we're going to be governed by robots. How many times do we think, oh my God, no, that's impossible. I cannot deal with this situation. I cannot be happy with this situation. But when we learn how to deal with it, we can actually change a lot. So I learned that it's actually possible by the power of beliefs. And it's actually possible by the way you see yourself. Now, number one, the belief is extremely important. And number two, the focus is very important. We heard that earlier as well. Let's look at how important focus is. Now, let's pay attention to Floria Gay, who's running for France. And she is fourth. I will show her to you. She's right there. And it looks like she's not going to make it. She started way too late. And Floria, she gives everything she can, but and now watch her reaction. And they are European champions. How did she react? She was surprised, right? Why was she surprised? She thought she couldn't do it? Maybe. She was focused on finishing. She was focused on herself. 100% focused on herself in the moment when it absolutely counted to focus on yourself. What would have happened if she would have looked towards the front, towards the girls running in front of her? Never ever would she have done it. Would she have achieved it? And how many times, let's be honest, how many times do we look left and right, and what does this person do, and what does that person do, and that person got this position, and how many times do we compare ourselves, right? Especially in the new world, and especially in the world of Instagram and Facebook, and where we're showing all of our perfect lives. So it's important to focus on what we can actually do. So as I said, the belief is important. By that I don't mean the religious beliefs. I mean the belief on what do you believe in yourself. If I, for example, wake up in the morning and I say to myself, I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, not today. This is not your day. And then my boyfriend comes and says, hey, you look amazing. Now, who am I going to believe? Especially as a woman? Myself, right? Sometimes I think men are a little bit different. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. I look great. But for us women, it's a little bit different. So what we say to ourselves matters. And the second thing is our focus. So how do we lay our focus on struggle? And what do we believe when it comes to struggle? What do we believe when it comes to challenges? Are we able to say, yes, it is very challenging, and at the same time I can learn something, I can grow, my brain is actually growing? What do we believe, and how do we deal with, how do we lay the focus on negative feedback? We get negative feedback not only in the professional context, but also in our private context. And very important when it comes to a growth mindset is how do we deal with mistakes? Now, I know that you are in an industry where mistakes are not very, very well perceived, I could imagine. But to be honest with you, I speak in front of so many different industries. And I was saying this earlier, that the situation in most of these industries is the same. Even the fears are the same. So we are all, most of us, especially when you're very ambitious, you tend to be a perfectionist. At least most of us are. But what matters when it comes to a growth mindset is how do you deal with your mistakes? And Spotify has a great way, or has a great motto as well. They say, fail fast, learn fast, improve fast. And they even have fail walls. I'm sure you've heard this before. And I'm not saying that you should do as many mistakes as possible, but mistakes do happen, right? In our professional life and in our private life. And a lot of times what really bothers us is if we did that one mistake and we do not feel good about it. What Spotify does is they ask themselves afterwards, what did we learn and what will we do next? Now, what is important about these questions? What do you notice? They're future-oriented in terms of what will we do next. And they do not say, who did this? How could this have happened? They are concentrating on the future. And that is a growth mindset as well.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that's why I succeed.
I failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. Scientists say that we fall approximately 16,000 times before we learn to walk. 16,000 times we fell, we got up. We fell, we got up. So we do have a growth mindset within us. Who here knows Nick Vujicic? One person? Nick Vujicic is a very famous motivational speaker in the United States. Nick Vujicic cannot get up again because he does not have any arms and he doesn't have any legs. And this is him with his wife and his 4 children. And this is a growth mindset because he's using his unchangeable world and he's making the best out of it, and he's actually using it to motivate other people as well. Now, this wouldn't be possible if we weren't able to control or to regulate or to deal with our emotions. And this is why I would like to talk to you about the third box in our toolbox, which is emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is the way we deal with our emotions and the way we deal with the emotions of others. It's basically the way we make sure that the emotions work for us instead of against us. And the first part of emotional intelligence is the self-awareness. We also had this earlier when it came to self-management, like Françoise said. Self-awareness, looking at yourself in the mirror and observing yourself, like she said, is extremely, extremely important. Now, I would like to ask you, answer this question. You don't have to say it out loud. You may if you want. How do you feel right now from a scale of -10 to +10? Now, answer following question. What do you feel right now? I hope it's not hatred. Now, where do you feel that emotion right now in your body? Now, for whom was it easy to answer that question, especially the third one? Yeah, about 50%. For a lot of us, it is not always easy to answer that question because we're so busy. And so how many times do we ask ourselves this question? Sometimes we feel like we don't even have time, right? We don't have time for these questions. But in the end, what matters is knowing ourselves, knowing our emotions, because you can only deal with your emotion, for example, with a fear, if you know it, if you know that you have it. Otherwise, there's no way you can even regulate it. So the second one is the self-regulation. Now, I will show you now, in my opinion, the most important quote that I can possibly show you when it comes to stress management, when it comes to personal development in general, when it comes to people management, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to basically communication, basically anything. Who here knows Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl was a very famous psychiatric, and he was a very, very, very famous neurologist from Vienna. And he survived the biggest hell one can possibly survive. He was in a concentration camp during the war. And he explains how the optimists, the ones that said that were truly, in a way, optimistic, the way we said it in the beginning, just think positive and it's going to happen. He says most of those died from a broken heart. But what he did was he visualized himself the way he will talk about his subjects when he comes out. And what he did was, and he wrote a fantastic, fantastic book called Man's Search of Meaning. I can highly recommend it to you. And he observed the way people react in in the worst possible situations that you can possibly imagine. And so he's famous for quoting, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, the most important part here is between stimulus and response, there is a space. Now, who here knows a situation that you're thinking, should I say something? Should I not say something? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Or maybe even, should I get angry? Should I not get angry? I have this with my boyfriend, so I'm like, should I say? Now, it's only a few seconds, right? It's only a frame of a few seconds. And this is the space. And if we train our emotional intelligence, we can actually use this space. Now, this yet, I cannot do this yet, is this space. Now, like I just said, a lot of times we have the inner critic that tells us, no, you cannot do it, or should I get angry? Yeah, get angry, just say it. And you're thinking, oh my God, why did I even say this? And this is why I would like to show you our first mental technique, which is called labeling. And for that, I would love to invite you one more time to think about, or maybe even to jot down, to write down, what are the 3 emotions that reoccur during your day-to-day life, no matter what emotions that are. You can look at the chart, but you don't have to. You can just jot it down. What are the 3 emotions that occur in your daily life over and over again? Okay, stop. Who here has 3 emotions? About 10 people. Now, one more time. Why is this so difficult for us to answer? And I did say to you, you do not have to look at this chart, but most of us look at the chart. Let me see, what emotion could I have? But if we have a high self-awareness, we know our emotions. And now there are a lot of times, there's one emotion, one blocking emotion that comes again and again and again, and it's fear. Our biggest fears are, number 1, not to be loved, and number 2, to fail. And a lot of times when we get stressed, what happens is we identify with the stress, and we identify ourselves with the emotion. And what labeling does is it says distinguish between yourself and between your emotion. I don't know if you know Jan Frodeno. Jan Frodeno has won the Ironman 3 times. That's 1 time more than I did. So that's pretty good. No, I'm kidding. For the ones who think, she's... Now, the Ironman is extremely, extremely hard, right? It's like 180 kilometers cycling, right? And yeah, so a lot. I don't even want to think about it. He won it 3 times. And he was asked, what happens when you run the Ironman? what do you think about? And he was saying in this interview, he thinks about basically anything. But then he lists, I think about my vacation, I think about winning. So he already thinks about positive things that give him strength. And then he says something extremely interesting. He says, at some point, you know the pain will come. Just like in our lives, right? We know at some point the pain, the stress, the pressure will come. And what he does is he personifies his pain. And now some people are looking at me like, no, she's not going to say that. He talks, and I didn't say it, Jan Frodeno said it. He talks to his pain. And what he does is, at this moment when his pain comes, he says, hey, buddy, he calls him Kumpel, buddy, we have to go through this together. It sounds extremely crazy. I completely agree with you. And 5 years ago, I probably would have said, oh my goodness, that's not possible. But it makes a huge difference, because what he does by that, he creates a healthy distance between himself and his pain. And we can do that with our fear, for example, because like that, we do create that healthy distance. And we can also do it by the way we talk. For example, how many times do we say, oh my God, I'm so stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm so busy, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. But by this, I am stressed, we identify ourselves 100% with the stress. How about saying, I am feeling stress? It's a different, it makes, this is again between stimulus and response, there's a space. This space is, I am feeling stress, I'm acknowledging stress. I know it may feel a little bit weird to say that to yourselves, but it makes a huge difference. And my personal, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this story now, but since you're all so nice, I'm going to tell you my personal story when it comes to labeling. Now, a few months ago, I moved in with my boyfriend to a beautiful apartment right by the river in Cologne. And when we first visited this apartment, it was really not beautiful at all. It all had sorts of colors like rosé and yellow and blue, and it was kind of weird. The floor was really ugly, and then we were thinking, okay, let's put on some imagination, and it's going to be nice. So once we decided, yeah, it's going to be nice with a nice floor and with white walls, that night or that evening when we got home, or to our other home before, I was so excited. The night I couldn't sleep. I was like feeling like a kid before Christmas. The next morning I called the landlord. I said, yes, we want to take this apartment. We're so excited. And so she said, yes, wonderful. And what happened then was that the landlords are a little bit, let's just say a little bit different than us. And they're maybe not as quick, and there were so many complications and so many negotiations as well. And the day when we went to sign the lease, we actually went into the elevator, and there was another woman that lives in that building, and she was saying to us, you cannot move in there, it's impossible, it's not an apartment for rent. And that was the day that we actually drove up to sign the lease. So in the end, it all worked out, and we signed the lease, and it was basically panic for nothing. And that day, we went on vacation, my boyfriend and I. So we're driving in the car, and I am in an extremely bad mood. In such a bad mood that I'm thinking, okay, let's just not move into this apartment. And then I was thinking, okay, I cannot on the one hand talk about emotional intelligence and growth mindset, and at the same time now just be completely frustrated and not do anything about it. And then I asked myself, while I was talking to my boyfriend or writing to my best friend or WhatsApp, like blah, 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 I was asking myself, first of all, what emotion is behind my reaction right now? And since I teach asking these questions, I knew what question to ask. And it was fear. Because I asked myself, how could it be that I'm going from a state of being so excited that I can hardly sleep to, oh my God, this is so horrible, I just do not want to move in there. How is it possible? It's the same apartment. Nothing has changed. Even now, it's beautiful. So it was fear. And then I asked myself, okay, is this me talking or writing right now? Or is this my fear? And once I was able to identify my fear, I did actually do what Jan Frodeno does. Thank God my boyfriend doesn't know that. And I said to myself, like, hey, buddy, we need to get through this together now. Now, one day had passed, and then it was fine. But I'm telling you, if I would have not done this, 100% would I have sabotaged our vacation. I would have found all sorts of things that would have bothered me, and we would have had a fight or whatever. So it does make a difference. It does make a difference if you identify yourselves with your fear, with your stress, or if you set that boundary and if you create a healthy distance. You may not be able to stop a bird landing on your head, but you can keep it from building a nest. And through that, you keep it from building a nest. Now, the second mental technique I would like to tell you about is priming. And I think this is especially also important for you when you prepare yourselves for your day-to-day business, or even when you're about to speak to a difficult client, for example. Now, priming is the way we prepare ourselves mentally. Now, who here knows the snooze button? Aha, so many! Now, I knew that snooze button very well in my old life. Most of the times, I would put my alarm 1 hour before so I could snooze. Oh, it's so wonderful. And then I would wake up and I would be tired. I always get that same answer. Exactly. We all know it. So we are tired. Now, you see me here I did not only go to Bali, I went to India afterwards. You see me here in India at 6 o'clock in the morning, barefoot, practicing the Indian martial arts, Kalari Payato, on a clay ground. Now, rhetorical question. Does it really make sense to snooze for 1 hour? Obviously not. So, I wanted to break my neuronal pathway. And I said to myself every single time when I went to bed, when the alarm clock rings, I am full of energy and awake. Wenn der Wecker klingelt, bin ich voller Energie und wach. Said it in German, obviously. And I'm telling you, ever since, I do not use the snooze button anymore. And that is a miracle. Now, what happened here? First of all, number one, when you do this, and I will tell you the relevance in terms of your business in a few minutes. Number one, when you do this, believe in it. If you go to bed and you're like, okay, she said, when the alarm clock rings, it's not going to work, okay? Now, number two, actually see yourself the way you get up and the way you deal with that little voice saying, come on, fall asleep again. So you overcome that little voice. And number three, do it a few times. And I'm not saying 16,000 times, but practice it just a few times. Now, how could this be relevant to you in terms of business? You can prime yourselves before you go into, for example, a meeting. Now, what I do, if I give you my example for my working world now, before I go on stage or before I speak before people or before I go into negotiation to a new client, for example, it's the same thing. I have to negotiate with my client. I prime myself, which means, first of all, I visualize and I imagine how do I want to act, how do I want to, what posture, how do I want to react, and how do I want to hold even my body? How do I want to speak? And very importantly, how will I deal with a crisis or with challenges? If it's a negotiation or if it's a difficult client, how will I deal with a client? I once had a client that got up in the middle of a conversation and went in front of his computer to check his emails. And I was thinking, okay, between stimulus and response, there's a space, so I can deal with it, all right. And in the end, it worked out well. It was just a technique to kind of provoke me and to see how I will react. So you take that into consideration. How will you deal with the challenges that may arise? And then you can actually react completely differently because you are mentally prepared. And another way that you can prime yourselves is not only by thoughts and by languages also, for example, the potato example, but it's also by certain anchors. This is why vision boards, for example, are very, very helpful at the same time. And also, I said to Dimitra, I have to go and sit down and listen to music. I have my own prime playlist, for example. It's a playlist that has music that really gives me strength and that puts me into a certain state. Then certain external influences. What, for example, do you listen to or what do you read before you go to sleep? Now, there's one golden rule when it comes to mental techniques. Do not read or listen to or watch the news right before you go to sleep. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't watch the news. Of course, that's important, but not right before you go to sleep. Same thing with answering, oh, I'm just going to answer that one email, and then I'm going to have it out of my head. What happens in that moment is your subconscious does make sure that cortisol gets released. And on top of it, when you get a little bit sleepy, your brain goes into the alpha waves. This is the meditative state, and this is the perfect time for the subconscious. So if you get all the negative messages and, oh my God, artificial intelligence is going to do this and la 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 la, you're going to fall asleep stressed. So avoid listening or reading the news, for example, or checking your emails right before you go to sleep. And also see what can give you strength, what can give you power. I like to listen to podcasts that inspire me. For example, in the morning when I'm still a little bit sleepy, I like to listen to people that put me in a good mood and that inspire me. So it makes a huge difference what we let in and also who we let in. And the fourth one is the state management in terms of how do you handle your body. Now, what can you do to avoid this? Now, we know that we do have certain movements or certain postures that are connected with a certain way that we feel, right? Now, everybody get up for one moment, please. Don't worry, we won't do the sprinter again. Now do me a favor and take in the position or the posture that you have when you are not feeling well. You're like, some are like, I always feel well. Now where are your shoulders? Down and in the front, exactly. Now do me a favor, keep that posture. I know it's very weird right now, but by now you should already know I'm a little bit weird. So keep that posture and turn to your neighbor, the one you like most. No, I'm kidding. Just turn to your neighbor. Keep that posture. Keep that posture and say to that person, today is a fantastic day. Okay. I know it's staged, but does it feel right? No, right? So how do you hold your shoulders? What do you do when you feel strong or when you feel well, good? Where are your shoulders? Back, exactly. You open up the chest area, right? Now turn to the other person in the hopes that that person still likes you. With that position and say to this person, today is such a bad day. Such a bad day, right? Okay, now that doesn't make sense either, right? So please have a seat. Now, have you ever seen a Superman like this? Let's be honest. Now, it's important to open up our chest. Now, we can do just by simply rolling the shoulders back and down. We change. It's one little tiny wheel that we can twist. We change our state. And even if it's just a tiny little difference that it makes, because we do have certain postures that are related to certain emotions, and they're obviously the same all over the world because we have all continents here. Yes, great. I'm going to write it down as a study. Now, what I learned when I went to Bali in combination with the body was breathing. I thought I knew how to breathe until I went to do yoga. I realized, okay, I do not know how to breathe. Now, what happens when we are stressed? How do we breathe? Shallow, exactly. And you all, I saw some of you were automatically putting your hand here. Where do we breathe through? Through our chest, exactly. Now, and we breathe very fast at the same time. Now, what's important, and I know you know this, but just as a quick reminder, when we are very stressed, the number one and most important tool we have is to breathe. So, what we can do is not only breathing, but we will do something in a few minutes on how to breathe and at the same time to activate our prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part in our brain who's the boss. that part of our brain makes the decision, and that part of our brain is also responsible for being diplomatic and for making the right decisions. Now, when we have a little bit too much to drink, we may say things or do things that we normally wouldn't do or say, hopefully at least. That is because the prefrontal cortex gets deactivated when we drink too much. Now, we can actually regulate our emotions and regulate our stress by activating our prefrontal cortex. And how do we do this? Through counting. Now, there are 3, for example, maybe you've heard of it before, that when you're really stressed, or sometimes you even have this in stress management classes or even communication classes, that you count from 1 to 10 and from 10 to 1. And let me tell you, it works. Even with my boyfriend, who the other day said, I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I learned I have to count from 1 to 10, from 10 to 1. It does work, even for someone who's not very keen on these things. Now, the third one is the one that we're going to be doing now in just a few seconds. And the second one, we do not have enough time today to talk about that in depth, but I would still like to give you that to do some research on it. It's called the 5-second rule from Mel Robbins. Does anybody know Mel Robbins? Mel Robbins she used to be a lawyer, and then she was a CNN speaker, and now she's a speaker all over the world. And she created the 5-second rule, also by accident, by the way. She found herself in a crisis, in a total life crisis, and she could not get out of bed, similar to my situation, but just I didn't have a crisis. And then she saw one day how the NASA was igniting a rocket ship. I don't know if that was English, but you know what I mean, right? And then they count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And then she said to herself, that's it. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to get out of bed. And when I'm just in that moment, these few seconds when I'm saying, no, I'm just going to stay in bed, I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I'm going to get up. And now, again, this is not about getting up, but she's the one who got famous with the 5-second rule. And again, between stimulus and response, there's a space. With these 5 seconds, if you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. If you have that moment when you say, should I say something? Should I not say something? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, yes. Should I not say something? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop in that case. And it does work. She's really famous with her 5-second rule. So it works to break your own thinking and behavioral patterns, and it works to calm yourself down as well. But let's do the 4, 7, 8 breathing technique really quickly. And don't worry, it will not hurt. It's 4, 7, 8, which means that we will inhale on 4, we will hold our breath on 7, and we will exhale on 8. Now, in case you are pregnant, just close your eyes and just breathe normally. Now, all the men are like, yeah, I'm not pregnant. Now, do me a favor and place your feet on the ground for just a few seconds. Now, place your hands just relaxed on your thighs, on your legs. And do me a favor, close your eyes. And I know that not everybody likes to close their eyes, but maybe you want to break your pattern and to leave your comfort zone for just one quick moment. Because first of all, it is more respectful towards your colleague if you also close your eyes, not only one. And second of all, you can actually place the focus inwards. Now, while you have your eyes closed, do me a favor and let your shoulders drop. Relax your shoulders. Relax your neck. Relax your jaw. Relax your eyes. Relax your forehead. Relax your head now. And I'm sure that you have many thoughts that are going through your mind, and maybe you're asking yourself, do I want to do this, or what is this? And maybe you're beginning to judge, and that's okay. Let the thoughts come, let the thoughts go. And now for once, just pay attention in terms of self-awareness, pay attention on your breathing without controlling it, without judging it. How do you breathe now? Do you breathe deeply or shallow? Do you breathe fast or slowly? Do you breathe through your belly or through your chest? And now begin, if you want to, you can place your hand on your belly. And with every inhale, your belly rises. And with every exhale, your belly falls. Deeply inhale, think let. And exhale, think go. Inhale on 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale normally. Keep your eyes closed for one more second. And then a deep inhale into your belly. And exhale, open your eyes now. How do you feel? Good? A little bit more calm? Now, in case you do have sleeping issues, this is a wonderful technique that you can use before you go to sleep, or if at night you wake up and the wheel of thoughts spins and spins and spins, you can use this because, number one, it's a 3-in-1 technique. First of all, you're placing your focus onto the counting. And I know we can multitask, and I know we can think and count at the same time. But still, you're placing more focus on your counting. That's number one. Number two, you are activating your prefrontal cortex, so you're relaxing yourself. Number three, by exhaling double the amount, you are activating your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is connected with all of your intestines. So your vagus nerve, if it gets activated, it actually relaxes you. And congratulations, what you just did was meditating as well. Now, this is a moment that you can use, and you can even do it during your day. You can do it in a meeting without closing the eyes and without counting out loud. You can do it by people not even noticing. And you can automatically relax in this moment and turn down your system. Now, the rabbit. How many breaths a minute does a rabbit take, approximately? 300? 150, but what rabbit do you have? My goodness. Now, expected lifespan of a rabbit is?
It's AI enhanced.
I'm sorry?
It's artificial intelligence enhanced.
Yes, exactly. Now, 6 to 10 years expected lifespan. How many breaths a minute do we take? Now we could count, but we don't have time. It's about 12 to 15 per minute. Expected lifespan? Worldwide, 73. We all have to breathe. Now, the turtle, how many breaths a minute does a turtle take? 0, exactly, almost. It's 1 to 2. Expected lifespan of a turtle?
900.
More than that. It's 150 to 200 years old. So if you take one thing with you from this part, it's breathe deeply when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you're feeling stressed. Now, last but not least, we do need our environment in order to create a growth mindset, in order to be motivated at the same time. And this is the part of emotional intelligence that is external. It's about empathy and it's about social skills. Now, Chait-Ming Tang, who is the founder of the mindfulness program of Google, Search Inside Yourself, he also wrote a fantastic book. He says when he speaks in front of people who are kind of critical when it comes to mindfulness, he says to himself, love them, understand them, forgive them, grow with them. And this is priming. And this is his mantra. By the way, by saying this to himself, this, for example, grow with them, is a growth mindset. He's using this, and by saying this to himself, he puts himself in a different state and he increases his empathy. Now, this is my client. What is she doing? Now, we do need other people. We do need our network. And why? Because they are mirror neurons. Professor Dr. Rizzolatti from Italy with his team found out that when they were working with chimpanzees, that when one chimpanzee was watching the other eating a banana, that one just watching had the same exact reactions. Why is that? Because of the mirror neurons. We know that when somebody yawns, if I were to yawn, all of a sudden you all yawn. And we know it when we smile at babies, they smile back at us, right? We also know it by finding others who look a little bit similar to us. Or here comes my personal favorite. There you go. So it does make a difference who we let into our network. And do you know those couples that after a while they look very similar? You're like, what happened to you? Are you related now? It's the mirror neurons. We do take that in. So make sure that you find people who inspire and who give you energy at the same time. And last but not least, this is Mathieu Ricard, who is a French monk. And he's known as scientifically proven the happiest man on earth. Now, he doesn't care so much about the title because he's a monk, obviously. But it took him, he participated in a study for 12 years on how his brain changes during meditation. And they found out that while he was meditating on compassion and on empathy, his brain, the areas in his brain that are responsible for feeling good, actually lit up. We can test those things. You're looking at me like, oh no, are you serious? So it does make a difference. And what I find so astonishing is when we increase our empathy and our compassion, we not only help others, we feel better. We help ourselves. So it's a win-win situation. And he always says, stop thinking me, me, me. And to wrap this all up, I would like to tell you one last very personal story. And yes, it is a true story, because I once had somebody asking me, is this true? This can't be true, and kind of hurt me. Yes, it is a very true story. Now, my brother lives in London with his beautiful family, with his wife and his 3 children. And his oldest son, Sam, is born with, it's called dyspraxia maybe in English. And he's not capable of moving as fast and as flexibly as his friends, and he will never be. Now, Sam has a friend called John Preston. And John Preston, when he was born, he was taken away from his parents because his parents have mental problems. He came into a foster home for 1 year, and then his grandmother took him. Now, John Preston doesn't have an easy life, and he probably never will. But there's one thing that he can do very well. He can run really fast. And about 1.5 years ago, when the kids were 6 years, there was a competition. They had to run 1 mile. Let me tell you, 1 mile for 6-year-old is a lot, and for 39-year-old Vivienne Dübbert also. And everyone said, it was clear, John Preston, he's going to rock that thing, right? And you know how it goes. At the end, the family is there by at the goal and waiting for the kids to arrive. And then there's one child, and the next child, and the next child, and everyone is, where's John Preston? And then for a very, very long time, there was nobody. And all the way at the end, John Preston comes with my nephew, holding his hand and running towards the goal. And that is emotional intelligence. And that is what we need so much in this world, in this fast-paced world, to be there for each other. And at the same time, without him actually knowing it, he did get something great out of it, because he got a pokal now. He got an award for companionship. And he did not only that, also changed his life, or parts of his life. And he did put an imprint in the life of my nephew, because at 6 years old, you will remember this situation. So I know that we do get very focused on ourselves during these times, but it's so important that we help each other. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So therefore, sometimes it is helpful to look at things from a different perspective. And I know that your day or your life is not easy. And probably every single day kind of looks like this, I could imagine, especially in your fast-paced business world. But emotional intelligence and a growth mindset can be your support, can be your hand to help you deal with these fast-paced times. Because I know sometimes we don't always like the colors, but at the end, we see the picture. So go ahead and live your life. Breathe deeply. Thank you very much.